everyone, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today I am doing my April wrap-up, which I am thrilled to chat about. Because this past month I read a total of 10 books, which is the most I've read in years. I don't know guys, I was just burning through the novels this past month. I'm 6 books ahead on my GoodReads goal. Who would have thought? I thought I was gonna fail that GoodReads goal pretty much immediately when I said it. So to say that I'm exceeding it by so many, I'm shocked. The main reason why I was able to read so much is because I've discovered a new genre, and that is definitely Regency Romance. I have been falling down the Regency Romance rabbit hole and reading so many books within this genre. That being said, of the 11 books I'm going to be talking about today, 5 are romance. I'm going to couple them all together and chat about them at the end of the video. So the first 6 books I'm going to chat about are from a variety of different genres, but if you're looking for romance, skip to the end or watch the whole thing, whatever floats your boat. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. So the first book I'm going to chat about is Kingdom of Gods by N.K. Jemisin. This is the 3rd and final book to the Inheritance trilogy, and this is a trilogy that was a joy to read for me. I would say the 3rd book, which I read this month, is probably my least favorite. I can really respect what N.K. Jemisin was trying to do and did do with this book, but I would say it was just like not as strong as the other 2 installments in this trilogy. This whole trilogy is definitely an exploration of gods and godhood and the relationships of gods with humans, which is just a topic I personally find fascinating. The 3rd book itself follows a god that we've encountered many times in the first 2 novels, and essentially, in the beginning of this book, due to some mysterious circumstances, he is becoming human. So this novel is really about the exploration of losing godhood and following a character who has been fixed in certain types of behaviors and perspectives for so long, literally forced out of those simply by growing up because he is the god of tricksters and childhood, and kind of seeing the impact on a psyche of a god in that way, as well as wrapping up and concluding a bunch of different political narratives that are happening within this world. Overall, it was definitely a very interesting story, and I thought the following of this god, Sia, the main character, was super fascinating. I found him to be a little less of engaging as a narrator as our first 2. I loved the first 2 books in this installment, and I found it to be a little slow. The middle did drag, but the beginning and the end were really captivating, especially because it explored this very complex and dynamic relationship between Sia the god and these 2 siblings. Overall, I thought the trilogy was very well constructed. Again, I love gods and fantasy, and I read it really quickly and was really fascinated by the whole thing. I would give this final book probably a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Still really good, really kept me captivated at the end. The middle was a bit slow, but overall I feel like this trilogy was very strong. Next book I picked up was The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. This was definitely one of the most anticipated books of this year for me. I loved this author's novel Station 11, which I read right when that came out now 4 or 5 years ago. She has such a way of basically writing all these disparate plot threads and tying them together in such fascinating ways, and also just having such a interesting mix of people and time and switching back and forth. Overall, The Glass Hotel was good. I did not love it as much as Station 11, which to me is like one of my favorite books I have ever read, definitely a 5 out of 5 star. And I would say Station 11 just inherently had so much more heart to it. It was harrowing, but there was this feeling of hope and growth amongst all the characters that you were kind of experiencing, and I felt like the overall conclusion, the tying of all those different plot points, was just much more satisfying in Station 11 versus The Glass Hotel. Overall though, I would say The Glass Hotel is still very captivating. It's essentially following a variety of different characters in and around this single hotel in this like desolate island in Vancouver off the coast of Canada. The perspectives are jumping forward and back in time. Sometimes you're following them in childhood, sometimes you're following them in their later parts of life, but inherently all the different perspectives are in some way connected, and their story is kind of interwoven between all of them. In the beginning of the book, you're kind of given these disparate thoughts, and you don't really understand why they're there or the connection, but then you realize why these particular moments in time are so important for these different characters. Overall, it was a really good book. It's a really dark book. I kind of describe it as a book about sad and bad people, and it definitely doesn't have that like element of hope or even growth throughout it, but it's still really a fascinating look on a bunch of different screwed up people doing screwed up things for each other. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Not as good as Station 11, but still really interesting, and Emily St. John Mandel's writing is beautiful. Next book I picked up was Most Likely by Sarah Watson. I picked this up for a book club I was participating in this month, and this is by the screenwriter of The Bold Type. And this was such a fun YA contemporary novel. Basically the premise is you're following 4 best friends in high school, and at the beginning of the story, one of them becomes the president of the United States, and then it cuts back to their senior year in high school. You don't know which of the four girls becomes president, but kind of as you read the story, one just like absolutely enthralled by this beautiful female forward friendship, and like all the girls are so different, but seeing how they come together is just like lovely. It really brings you back to this like positive high school feeling. But the idea is as you go through, you're trying to like figure out this mystery of who becomes president, but you kind of quickly realize, and this is why I think this book is so great, is that any of them in theory could, because you watch them grow, tackle new personal problems, develop, you know, as young women ready to take on the next chapter of their lives. So ultimately, yes, there is one that does become president, but all of them are like growing and learning together, and I just loved it so much. This is set in the senior year of high school. There are so many great elements of like friendship, as I already mentioned, romance, which is really, really great. That mystery keeps it very intriguing. There's also great representation in this. There is bisexuality in a girl-girl romance. There's also disability rep as well. So there's just so many great characters and great vignettes, and because it's switching perspectives for all of these girls, you really get inside their heads and learn to love them so much. I read it so quickly. I don't know, I just felt so much joy reading this. It had great humor, great dialogue, and honestly you could see this as a great TV show. The author's ability to write really interesting scenes, because she's a TV writer as well, really shined through this novel. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. Thought it was a lot of fun and a really great contemporary novel. Next book I'm going to talk about I read as an ebook, and that is Stormfront by Jim Butcher. This is technically a reread for me, and this is book 1 to the Dresden Files. This is a series I gave a try a long time ago. I'm not usually a serialized fiction kind of gal, but I love Jim Butcher. I loved his Codex Alera series, so this is a series I've been really wanting to love, and I've recently been seeing a lot of positive buzz about the more recent books in the series and how the series really transforms, becomes more dynamic, really grows. That really intrigued me to kind of give this book series a try again. So I picked up this first one. This is a series that basically follows our main character, who is a wizard detective. He basically like is a private investigator who takes on mysterious crimes, and they're mostly due to like magical cause or whatever. Our main character, Harry Dresden, very likable guy, young guy. He has like kind of quirky personality to him. There's some cool magic elements which I enjoyed, and overall this first one had a pretty engaging mystery. I wouldn't say it like was mind-boggling by any stretch of the imagination, but it was definitely a solid first installment and intrigued me enough to continue on with the rest of the series. I talked about this in my reading vlog, but you can definitely tell this book has definite quirks to it. I really liked it, but there are elements that really would pull me out of it, mostly because you can tell it was written by a guy. Some ways that women were described were just honestly like weird, like cheerleaders or like weird hair descriptors and like small things like that would kind of pull me out of the story, but I do feel like it's gonna get better with time. But nothing was so egregious that it made me want to put down more, that I kind of was just like smirking to myself sometimes as I was reading the scenes. But overall, I liked it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, which is the same rating I gave it the first time I read it, but I'm definitely more intrigued to see how the series continues to expand. It's also a really fast read. I liked the mystery, I liked the magical elements of the urban fantasy setting, so I'm excited to see how the rest of the books continue to progress, but I'm hoping each one gets better and better, but I will report back and let you know if that is the case. Next book I'm going to chat about, I've realized now, it's not an ebook, it is Regency Romance. So whoops. And that is The Dangerous Alliance. This is an ostentatious style romance story where we're basically following our main character, who is kind of in a perilous family situation. And in the beginning of the story, essentially our main character is put in a situation where she needs to get married quickly to save her family and her sister, as her sister is escaping a very traumatic and abusive home situation. And this time period obviously does not allot women a lot of freedom to basically escape that scenario. So our main character needs to get married as quickly as possible to create a safe home place for her sister and keep her parents also from losing all their money to her sister's bad husband. So that's kind of the setup of this. Our main character is a big Jane Austen fan who is actually appeared during this time period in writing as our main character is living. So she decides to read those books and use them kind of as a template to find a husband and kind of save the day with her sister. This book was really entertaining. There's romance, there is complicated childhood friendships that blossom into something else, there's mystery. I would say that the part of this book that made it so hard to put down is it's kind of like a soap opera. Like any cliche thing that you could possibly imagine that could be bad happens in this book. So it reads really quickly, but on the same vein of that, it kind of detracts from the seriousness of all these bad things that are happening, because it's like one thing after another after another after another that you're not really absorbing and as like really harrowing, but more entertaining, which I feel like has to be considered when looking at this book. That being said, I read it really quick. It was super cute. I liked the sister relationship. I appreciated the romance. It's really sweet and a fast read. And if you like Jane Austen, I feel like it's a really great book to pick up because there's so many fun references, and I love Jane Austen and I really appreciated that. Overall, I'd give this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Fun, a little too ridiculous for me, but I still really appreciated the romance story. Now, before I jump into the rest of my romance ebooks, I did want to quickly shout out the last physical book I am currently reading, which is The Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb, which is book 2 to the Farseer trilogy. I'm just over 50% done with this. I've read over 300 pages. And I'm liking this book a lot, even more than the first one. It's progressing in a way that I was hoping in terms of expanding the politics and kind of seeing Fitz, our main character, continue to grow and be like super involved in the castle. This book picks up right where the last one takes off, and if you're familiar with the series, a lot happens at the end of the first one and there's a lot of consequences coming through that. So seeing Fitz as a character really grow through the pain and the struggles of the last book is something I've really appreciated in this. Also, there's a couple of new characters that are introduced that I also love. Romance, and then also just like a really cool queen that comes to the castle that I just like stan for life. Inherently though, with Fitz's age and more experience from the first book and then doing additional training into the second book, I really feel like the politics and the urgency have really been like upped, you know, like there's this looming threat from an outside force, there's this weird mysterious illness that turns people into like basically mindless zombies, and all of this has kind of an unknown origin. There's also a bunch of castle politics that are really keeping me on my toes, and overall I'm like flying through this. I really do not want to put this down. The first one felt a little slow to me, and this does not have that at all, and I'm really liking it a lot more than the first one. All this is to say I'm happy to see that I'm liking this series more and more with each book, which I was expecting. So right on progress with this, and I do plan on finishing this pretty early in the month of May. Now moving on to the romance ebook section. So I have read another 5 Regency Romance novels that I all really enjoyed. I'm gonna couple them together because one was an entire series, 4 by the same author. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So the first 4 books I read are all by the same author, and that's Tessa Dare. I really enjoy her writing. She's really known for creating really like a romantic comedy kind of setting. There's a lot of banter and humor and dialogue that happens between the characters, but there's obviously also a lot of steamy elements as well. This genre generally can be really problematic, and I do feel like Tessa Dare makes sure there's still elements of definite consent as well as communication and respect and boundaries and all of that, which I appreciate because otherwise I wouldn't like the books. That being said, the first series I read by her is definitely my favorite of any Regency Romance I've read so far, and that is the Girl Meets Duke series. It basically follows a different main character, each from the same friend group meeting some sort of version of a duke. Each one has their own like tropes and main storylines, but overall they have the same positive elements, which is great banter, great romance, highly entertaining, and I read all of them in like 24 hours. But to quickly go through the summaries and my star ratings for each one, I'll do that now. The first one is Bringing Down the Duke, which is essentially a marriage of convenience story. Our main character kind of goes to this moody duke who has recently come back from war and is very badly scarred, doesn't believe he can be loved by anyone, and she's trying to get money for a wedding dress that she made for his previous fiance who like left him. When she arrives, he's like, great, you already have a wedding dress, let's just get married. I need a duchess because I need an heir, and then you can do whatever you want. Once I have the heir, you'll have a lot of money and freedom, whatever. So that's the premise of this story, and like all of these books about 2 people that are at conflict and then begin to fall in love with each other and reform themselves in the best ways and just grow to be the best couple unit. I liked this one a lot. I think it's my least favorite of the 3, but it does have some really exceptional banter and just a really great foundation and first novel within this series. The next one is The Governess Game, which is probably my favorite. This follows another friend who is really passionate about stars and astronomy, which is really cool. I really love that Tessa Dare really interweaves that each of these females has a distinct passion that they're trying to pursue, and they have like more to their character than just being like sweet and charming or wanting to find love, or some of them aren't even looking for love at all. Like our main character in The Governess Game is like, I want to be an astronomer and have my own house in the countryside and be left alone. Essentially, she takes a governess position with a well-known rake because he offers her a bunch of money, because the 2 young girls that have basically come under his care are very troublesome, and essentially all of their previous governesses have quit after a day because they've just been very difficult to deal with. This story I love so much because yes, there's romance, but more than that, there's this beautiful unconventional family unit of all these people coming together and finally allowing themselves to be loved. You know, like seeing the little girls begin to trust again, seeing this man take on more of a fatherly role was like so unbelievably sweet, and then kind of our main character helping bring all of this together. It's just, it will make you, like, your teeth will hurt. It's so unbelievably sweet and so funny. The little girls are my favorite. They want to be pirates. They're constantly like killing off their doll and like all sorts of bizarre illnesses. It's just so great and so entertaining, and it's probably my favorite. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. Best Regency romance I've read so far, so I got the 5 out of 5 star rating. Loved it a lot. And the last book that I read within this series is The Wallflower Wager. Someone described this on GoodReads as the Slytherin Hufflepuff pairing that we all needed, and I think that's a perfect explanation for this story. This follows our main character, who is the daughter of an earl, so she obviously has a very well-established place in society, but she's a known spinster and not really interested in trying to find a husband. What she is interested in is taking care of all these wayward animals that keep falling into her possession and finding them sweet and loving homes. However, basically her uncle is kind of like forcing her to either move back home to the estate, not live in town anymore, or she needs to prove to them that she's kind of making a change to try to be involved in society. So she basically gets the agreement from her neighbor who's looking to sell his house for a profit to help her like rehome all these animals. And her neighbor is basically like new money and not very accepted in society. They fall in love. It's great. There's so much great banter. Again, Slytherin Hufflepuff kind of pairing, if that's what you're into. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. So that is the Girl Meets Duke series. I would highly recommend these 3 novels. I loved all of them. From there, I did pick up the first book to another one of Tessa Dare's series, The Castle Ever After. I think it's called, oh, something with a Duke. Like, something Duke. Here's the cover. It's based like a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It definitely has similarities to Bringing Down the Duke in that the main character and the love interest have like a similar dynamic. The love interest is very gruff, and he also has a scar. He's blind, and he just is like tries to like get everyone out of his life. He could be kind of mean and moody, that whole kind of thing. And our main character comes and she basically inherits this castle that he's living in, and there's this misunderstanding, and so they're trying to fix it up for sale, blah blah blah. I liked this one a lot. I appreciated the banter. It's probably my least favorite of the 4 of Tessa Dare's books I've read. I feel like it's just not as modern as the Girl Meets Duke series. It was entertaining, but the moodiness of the main character kind of detracted from me. I feel like he didn't really reform or respect our main character enough for me. I liked it. It was good. Not as good as the other 3, so I gave this one like a 3 out of 5 stars. And the very last book I'm going to talk about is Edenbrooke. And so this to me is a wonderful Regency romance. In comparison to Tessa Dare, which has rom-com and a lot of sweetness, they are very steamy. Like, they're adult romance, and definitely like hot times are happening in those. Versus Edenbrooke is definitely a much softer, sweet, innocent type of Regency romance, probably a lot more realistic to what was actually happening during this time period. But this basically takes place in this beautiful country estate, and our main character, the beginning of the story, is living in Bath and her sister is living in town. They're twins, but they're very different. She's much more quiet, just wants to live in the country, ride her horse and paint, versus her sister's a lot more ambitious, much more, has like this natural light. She wants to move up in society. They're different. Their mother has passed away and their father is living in France, so they're kind of in the hands of relatives. At the beginning of this book, our main character's sister invites her to stay at this estate for the summer because she's trying to woo the count that lives there. She goes there early. The wrong sister falls in love with the count. It's so sweet. And it's basically like 2 people not allowing themselves to be loved, realizing they should allow themselves to be loved. It has action, it has some really great intrigue, but most of all, it's just so sweet and so endearing, and it's not very long. Another book I read in like 24 hours. It'll just like put a smile on your face. Like, it's soft and just like you just want to hug them and make sure they're happy forever. So this is the first book I think to a multi-book series, so I'll definitely be checking out the rest of these. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, but definitely like a different Regency romance kind of vibe. Like much more innocent, much more sweet than the Tessa Dare books. Alrighty guys, so those are the 10 books I read this month. Let me know down below some books you've read recently, as I would love to know, and I'll see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye!